told, like, see that figure over there, you know, he's Jesus, but in secret he's the devil, and he's the savior of the world. And see that figure over there, well, he's the devil, but in secret he's Jesus, and he's the savior of the world. Sort of identifying these two concepts. And there is an etymological reason for that. I mean, Satan is literally a word meaning adversary or enemy. So to call something satanic is really just to mean it is my enemy, in a very literal sense. So this is where the whole struggle with the will of the angel thing becomes key, because I think what Curley is seeing with the whole satanic aspect of this is we are supposed to be dealing with things we don't want to deal with. We're supposed to be facing things we don't want to face. This Holy Guardian Angel experience is, in Curley's AA system, a precondition to actually annihilating the ego and crossing the abyss. Part of the reason that this is the case is the angel is supposed to throw stuff at us that we don't want to deal with. Like we were talking about earlier, to cross the abyss, you have to unite your consciousness with all things. So, you know, if you've got a problem with centipedes, you're going to have to unite your consciousness with centipedes in absolute, unconditional love and really accept the concept of that into your being. And that's totally necessary to annihilate the ego. Like, everything that you do not like, you will become part of. Everything you like, you will also become part of, but that's easy. That requires no problems whatsoever. So the reason that the angel is sort of the precondition to crossing the abyss is the angel will force you to deal with all the things that would cause your consciousness to break apart. The whole crossing the abyss experience, Curley identifies with the lurker, what he calls the lurker at the threshold, or he identifies with the devil Sharonzon, who's discussed in Dee's papers, which he says is essentially dispersion, or the idea of dispersion. The idea is, when you're trying to have that experience, you're trying to unite your consciousness with everything. If there's a part of you that's blocking some part of everything, then that's like a little crack for this entity to creep into. And then it will disintegrate you through that. And that's where people sort of like lose their shit and go crazy. And then, even if they're successful, other people kind of think that they lost their shit and went crazy because they don't understand where they're coming from anymore. And yeah, so it's difficult to judge. It's difficult to judge. That's where we get to the whole success is your proof thing. It's like, are you producing anything useful? Like, I've talked to people who said that they crossed the abyss, but they haven't really done anything that is interesting or important in any way, shape, or form. And I would sort of expect, if you've had that experience genuinely, you would at least be producing something that, you know, would make me go, you know, this is different or whatever. So the whole satanic thing, like, that's one big section of where people get off on a problem with the ritual and whether it's an issue. And I think that what they really just need to do is look at what Satan literally means, or like that idea literally means. There's another one which gets raised by Stephen Skinner, I will name him because fuck him, as an objection to Crowley's use of this ritual, where he says, well, it's an exorcism. The whole point of the ritual is an exorcism. And in a sense, this is true. How that becomes an argument, I don't know. Have people actually read this? I'm kind of maybe arguing about something that isn't an issue, but sorry?
Well, it's talking about the origins of the ritual.
Right, right.
From the term Bornless one comes from Paris and
Yeah.
the spell book, right? The exorcism ritual, and then they kind of changed the name to it. But I don't know, I read briefly about it.
Yeah, and he uses this like it's an argument. But I think that the whole like concept of this as an exorcism, and I think that's a legitimate thing to call it, fair enough, but essentially the way I always put it is when you try to destroy yourself, you essentially destroy everything you can destroy, and what's left is what you can't destroy. That eternal, infinite essence, the spark of the divine, or the presence of God, or the, I don't care what you call it, like, it's not really, sorry?
I was going to say, another meaning for the word Satan, when you go more into the East, is Satan, which means a being who is becoming.
Yes, and that concept of, that's when I said before about Spinoza and the substance, the idea that the substance is without beginning and self-creating, and that definitely is harmonious.
I wonder if that's what they mean by the dropping of the ego, is that as you drop the ego, you're becoming the being that you are.
It's an interpretation, certainly. Yes?
So how do you know that it's your holy guardian angel and it's not some spirit person?
Well, like, and that's,
You know, because
that's a big deal.
it seems kind of ridiculous to place your trust completely in one. That's extreme.
There's a lot of different ways to prove an entity or to get an entity to prove itself. I mean, and the question is, okay, if it's your holy guardian angel, it should be able to tell you, like, what's up with your life and where you're going and your direction. And that should be testable information, you know?
But why listen to another entity?
Well, because the idea is that, and one of the major points that Crowley's making with his whole like idea of why we should do magic to begin with, and not just like rely on whatever, is that there are entities that exist, intelligences, consciousnesses, whatever you want to call it, inorganic life forms, as Carlos Castaneda calls them, who actually have knowledge that we don't have and can tell us to go directions that we don't know to go, like higher intelligences. And Crowley's very clear that our civilization is going to fail. Like, we can't do this without some sort of guidance from something higher and bigger than ourselves, because otherwise we have nothing to aspire to. We have to have a goal of this, something that's beyond ourselves. There's one point, I think, where he says, like, I forget the way he puts it exactly. Basically, any goal that can be reached and manifested is only like a minor path. Like, we should be aspiring to things that we can never fully get to, so we can reach higher than ourselves, right?
Why do they care? Why
I don't think they care.
Why do they bother helping us?
Because we do these rituals that attract their attention. It's like...
is it like a food source for them? Is it an offering of some sort that we get?
No, I think they're just interested. I don't really like Londuquette a lot, but there's one point where he says something like, okay, like, and this is his justification of Enochian magic, or like, well, maybe you're pronouncing it right, maybe you're not. But he's like, if a mouse came up to you and said, you know, oh, great maker of bread and cheese, like, please hearken unto me as I have these things to say to you, and blah, blah, blah. You wouldn't care if the mouse was pronouncing words wrong sometimes. You would be interested enough in the fact that it was talking and trying to communicate with you. And that would just at least cause you to pause and go, well, maybe I'll deal with this for a little bit. Like, and I think that a lot of these rituals are like that. One thing that I noticed when you start doing these workings, the more interest you take in the astral plane and spirits that exist there, the more interest they take in you, because they become aware of you. Whereas before, they're just not aware of you. This is part of the reason that I'm very dismissive of people who tell me that they have been contacted by spirits without actually having done anything themselves. It's kind of like, well, why? Why would it, like you're saying, why would it care? Why would the spirit be interested? Whereas if you do these kind of things regularly, then you start to kind of get a little bit of back and forth and entities trying to contact you or communicate with you, just because they've noticed you. It's like you would say, just to use the most pedestrian possible example, like if you've met someone a couple of times, maybe like you drink at the same bar or whatever, and then you run into them on the subway, you're going to say, hi, how you doing? Like, you make some kind of contact with them, or if there's a stranger, you would just ignore them. And I think the same kind of rules apply with entities on the spiritual astral plane. Like, the more attention you pay to them, the more attention they're going to pay to you.
I have a question about the headless reference, because in Vedic astrology they have Ketu, which is a headless god. Is that at all like relevant to?
I don't think that would be.
South Node? Like,
I don't think that would be connected necessarily. I mean, in the what's the word I want? In the metaphorical sense, yeah, I'm sure they kind of probably draw on the same thing. I don't think there would have been that much influence on that particular ritual at that particular time. I mean, we can see a connection, but I don't think it would be necessarily the same. But I mean, it's just a basic human concept. Like, the head is important. We can do without the rest of these things. We can lose those. And
as in the Vedic tradition, the head is cut off. I don't know the exact story, but that's the north node, and the south node is Ketu, which is the headless body, which wanders around, is more intuitive, but Rahu is the evil part of your personality, which is separated from your body and obsessive, and going out like trying to devour everything.
Yeah, and we got it. And the thing is, I think this ritual is a way of confronting those things.
Oh, yeah.
And that's because that's the important part about like getting to the point that I'm talking about in terms of crossing the abyss, is we have to confront all the unpleasantness and so on and whatnot.
Yeah, because Ketu is the things that we're letting go of.
Yeah.